And now on to our featured proboscidean, or featured elephantid. Elephantid? Have trouble with that word. Mammuthus. You mentioned earlier mastodons, Garrett. So yeah, mammoths are not to be confused with mastodons. They're actually distant relatives of each other. But mammoths, going back to the tusk talk, they're known for their long, curved tusks. And mammoths lived from the Pliocene around 5 million years ago to the Holocene about 4,000 years ago, which is very different timelines than we talk about with dinosaurs.
Yeah, that 4,000 years ago number was really surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably basically all wiped out by people. I might be spoiling what you were going to say later.
Well, I would disagree. The humans played a minor role, but yes, you are spoiling.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Woolly mammoths lived up until about 4,000 years ago. There were a few sites. It was like they were slowly dying out. And then the last of them were about 4,000 years ago. They lived all over, though, mammoths. They were in Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America. And there are multiple species. Currently, there's 10 that are considered valid. We'll mostly focus on the woolly mammoth for this featured segment. But I do want to talk about mammoths a little bit in general. So the different species are known based on the number of enamel ridges on their molars. Earlier species had fewer ridges. And later mammoths also had longer crowns of their teeth, and the skulls were taller in height and also shorter in length. The oldest known mammoth is Mammuthus subplanifrons. It lived in the early Pliocene in what's now southern and eastern Africa. The largest known mammoth species weighed 12 to almost 16 tons, and they were about 13 to almost 15 feet or 4 to 4.5 meters tall at the shoulder.
You doubled again to the largest one that I was talking about.
I mean, they live up to their name, mammoth.
That's true.
Which I'll get into that a little bit. Also, there's some interesting etymology. But most mammoth species weren't that big. They were actually more similar in size to modern Asian elephants, weighing 3 to 6 tons.
Oh, that's it.
Still impressive, but compared to 12 to 16 tons? I do want to give a shout out to the Colombian mammoth. It's been found in the La Brea tar pits. It lived around the same time as the woolly mammoth, but again, focusing on the woolly mammoth for this episode.
The La Brea tar pits do have some really amazing mammoth specimens.
Yeah, that is a fun place to visit if you get a chance. There were also some dwarf mammoths. One dwarf mammoth was Mammuthus lammermoori, which lived on the Mediterranean islands in the late Middle and late Pleistocene. They're estimated to be 4.6 feet or 1.4 meters tall at the shoulder and estimated to weigh between 930 to 3,640 pounds or 420 to 1,650 kilograms. Another was Mammuthus columbi that lived on the Channel Islands of California at the end of the Pleistocene. Channel Island mammoths were between almost 5 feet to more than 6 feet or 1.5 to 1.9 meters tall at the shoulder. There was also the pygmy mammoth, Mammuthus exilus, and Mammuthus creticus, which lived in the earlier Middle Pleistocene in Crete and was estimated to be about 3.3 feet or 1 meters tall at the shoulder and weighed 400 pounds or 180 kilograms.
That's the cutest of the pygmy mammoths. Or the dwarf mammoths, I should say.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of range in sizes here. And then we've got the last species, which is Mammuthus primigenius, and that's the woolly mammoth.
Not a dwarf, though. Just a regular mammoth.
Yes, they were about the same size as modern African elephants. So a little bigger than the average mammoth.
Yeah. That is interesting, though, because I feel like as a kid, I always assumed woolly mammoths were much bigger than elephants. Maybe it was, again, my dinosaur bias, where it's like extinct things were so much bigger, but really, woolly mammoths are about the same.
I had the same thought, although we've been going to the zoo more often lately, and African elephants are quite large.
They are huge. They're insanely big. Like you were saying, upwards of 10 feet tall at the shoulder, and then they've got this huge head and massive tusks and everything. They're imposing animals.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sure the woolly mammoth was also imposing, especially with the tusks.
It's got a lot of meat on those bones, though.
You really want me to get into the human aspect part?
I can't help it.
Look, when it came to humans, yes, humans did hunt mammoths, but it's difficult to prove if humans were the cause of their extinction or not, because there's no direct evidence that the hunting was more than an occasional activity.
I'm still just so apt to quickly blame humans for making animals go extinct because we've done it so many times that it seems like a pretty simple explanation.
Well, there is a debate on if they went extinct due to climate change or humans overhunting them. Earth was getting warmer about 12,000 years ago, glaciers retreated, sea levels rose, and there were more forests than open woodlands and grasslands. But climate change had happened before in the Ice Age without leading to similar extinctions of megafauna or the large animals, so
Yeah.
that probably wasn't the only factor.
Yeah, there have been quite a few cycles of warmer, colder. Although I did see what you were talking about, where they were saying basically that mammoths, especially something like a woolly mammoth, is pretty well adapted for cold environments. And as it gets hotter, it could be a problem. Also, there was an issue of what sort of forest or non-forested land is available
Yeah,
and things like that.
and woolly mammoths ate a lot of grass, so having the open areas was good, but when it went away, that was bad.
Yeah. 4,000 years ago just lines up pretty well with people hunting.
Well, a lot of large mammals went extinct around the same time as mammoths. And with large animals, they tend to have smaller populations and a slower rate of reproduction.
4,000 years ago, though, is so recent. I saw multiple people make the point that when mammoths went extinct, the Egyptian pyramids had already been built in Giza.
That's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
There is a hypothesis that mammoths got an infectious disease, possibly introduced by humans or humans' pets, but that seems unlikely.
That's a pretty interesting theory.
What's more likely is that it's a combination of factors. There was a 2021 study of DNA from the environment that found that mammoths went extinct probably because of climate change and vegetation changes. They were losing their habitats, which meant they were losing their food sources, and that was just bad for them.
Yeah.
But anyway, they lived for a pretty good chunk of time. The woolly mammoth in particular lived about 400,000 years ago up until about 4,000 years ago. Most woolly mammoths did die out about 10,000 years ago, but like we were saying, there were some populations that survived until about 4,000 years ago. Many mammoth specimens have been found, not just woolly mammoth, but other kinds of mammoths. There's one site known as the Mammoth Site in Hot Springs, South Dakota in the Black Hills, where bones from at least 61 individuals of mammoths have been found. So probably there was a sinkhole that filled with water from a hot spring, and then that would have lured them in, and they would have been attracted by the warm waters and then slipped into the pool and died of starvation or drowning. Some of the bones look like the mammoths trying to get back up.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's pretty laborious tar pitsy, too.
That's true. There was one baby mammoth found in 2007 that shows that it may have eaten the poop of adult mammoths. It didn't have fully developed teeth for chewing grass, and fungi was found on dung and spores in nearby vegetation, which the baby would have eaten. Mammoth calves had a lot of fat to help them keep warm. It took a long time for a mammoth calf to be born. There was a gestation period of 22 months.
Oh, yeah. That's like, is that the same as elephants? Are elephants 24 months?
The African bush elephants, 22 months. Asian elephants are 18 to 22 months.
Oh, okay. So it's the same.
Yeah.
Well, that could be useful for things that I think your fun fact is about.
A little bit. It's also useful because, like with dinosaurs, how a lot of times the research compares birds and crocodilians because those are the closest living relatives. With mammoths, you can compare them to elephants. And like elephants, mammoths were maybe matriarchal and social.
Yeah, I know you were talking about how we went to the zoo. The last time we were there was just one African elephant and it's a male. And we were like, oh no, it must be lonely. And there was a sign up that said, female elephants like to be in groups. It didn't say anything about males liking to be in groups. So yeah, the matriarchal side of it makes sense.
Yeah, I felt sorry for the elephant though.
It seemed fine.
Yeah.
I assume the zookeepers know what they're doing. They said that they moved the female elephant because they wanted it to be around more elephants.
More female elephants.
Yeah, to make it happier.
That's true. While both male and female mammoths had tusks, some mammoths have been found with genitals, so we know if they were male or female. It's not something we can say with dinosaurs.
Nope.
The tusks are pretty cool because the growth lines in them can tell you the age of the mammoth.
Yeah, that's so cool. They do like a core sample, like they're drilling into rock or something is the way they sample it. They don't slice through the whole thing to do it like a histology ring like they do with dinosaur bones. They just go straight in. I think it's more consistent, so you don't need as destructive of a sample.
Mm-hmm. Mammoths had milk tusks before they had their massive permanent tusks. The milk tusks came around when they were aged 6 months and they lasted about a year.
Milk tusks.
Yeah.
They must call it that because I think some animals they call them milk teeth. So then it's milk tusks.
I think so. The mammoth tusks, they spiral or they corkscrew, and then the tusks twist in opposite directions. Speaking of interesting tusks.
Because mammoths have the more curved tusks, right, than mastodons?
Exactly. And mammoths may have used their tusks for interspecies combat. They maybe also use them to plow snow, break up ice to eat in the winter, if there's not water, or strip bark and dig up plants. Some mammoths unfortunately had severe tooth decay, and some even had cancerous growths.
Oof.
And I'll get into how the word mammoth came about, sort of, in a bit, but first we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. Now, it's unclear where and how the word mammoth came about exactly. It's possible it's from an Arabic word, mehemat, derived from the Hebrew word behemoth, which is the name for the primeval creature mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible. That was a large, strong animal with curved horns or tusks and believed to eat a lot of grass and water and have a mild and peaceful nature.
It does sound pretty accurate.
Yeah. There's another view that the name mammoth comes from various northern languages, possibly like Mammuth in Estonian. Ma means earth, and mut means mole, which links the name to this widespread belief that the animal burrowed beneath the ground. That was a kind of a legend for a while about the mammoth.
I mean, a lot of large animals do dig into the ground, like bears and things, so it's not surprising that a large animal would make a burrow. It's also interesting because we were talking about how mammoths coexisted with people. For so long, like even into the time when there was human civilization. It wouldn't be surprising if, because basically written language was around when mammoths were around, if somebody was like writing about mammoths and people continued to talk about it for generations after they went extinct.
And there's definitely a lot of art of mammoths. Humans were producing art in the latter part of the Ice Age, and that was about 35,000 to 11,500 years ago. It was mostly horses and bison, but after that came mammoths in terms of which one was depicted the most. There's over 500 representations known in paintings in caves and engravings on bone, stone, antler, and ivory. There's also stone plaques and carvings, tools from bones, jewelry. Huts made of mammoth bones have been found.
Wow. That takes a lot of hunting to get all those mammoth bones.
No, it's scavenging.
Oh, okay.
You're really trying to blame humans here.
I am. I've got a bone to pick with them.
Yeah. The word mammoth was introduced to Europe in 1618 to 1620 by Richard Johnson, who reported on the Mammoth tusks found in Siberia. And then the word mammoth was widespread in Europe by the 18th century. John Bell said in 1722 that the tusks were well known in Siberia, and they were often found in washed-out riverbanks. Siberians and the Inuit thought that mammoths were alive because there were bodies emerging from the permafrost since the Ice Age, and that included flesh and blood that was exposed by rivers and thawing. So it was thought that mammoths were a giant mole that occasionally came to the surface like a whale, but then died immediately when exposed to the sun or moonlight, and that explained why nobody saw one alive.
I love that legend. That is such a fun explanation. Because, if you find an animal that's laying there bleeding and it clearly was buried, What would you think?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you'd think it was just alive. You wouldn't think, oh, this thing died 10,000 years ago and froze solid that whole time and just now thawed.
Yeah, it'd be very hard to know that. And a lot of specimens were found with full stomachs. Some of them drowned or they were buried alive in a mud flow or the ground above them caved in. So there are a lot of legends of mammoths. There's some Chinese text from 1712 that says, quote, "The northern plain near the sea in Russia is the coldest place. There's a kind of beast which, like a mouse as big as an elephant, crawls in tunnels and dies as it meets the sun or moonlight. The native people often find it near the riverbank," end quote. Sometimes mammoth tusks were seen as talons of a vast bird or antlers of a giant deer or horns of a huge male goat.
That would be a really impressive bird that had a talon that's like 10 feet long. Oh, man.
Yeah. So the first attempts to draw a mammoth based on the bones led to some strange unicorn-like beasts or an ox with hooves and a great single horn on the forehead.
Because surely no animal would have multiple of these huge horns.
Unicorns are popular. And mammoth bones were often thought to come from giants before they were known to be from mammoths. Hans Sloane in 1728 studied teeth and tusks from Siberia and suggested that instead of giants, they belonged to elephants, so got a little bit closer. Johann Friedrich Blumenbach named Elephas primigenius in 1799, which made the woolly mammoth the same genus as the Asian elephant, and that name means firstborn elephant.
Oh, the primigenius?
Firstborn, and then Elephas, elephant. In 1828, Joshua Brooks used the name Mammuthus borealis for fossils in his collection that he put up for sale. George Cuvier identified mammoths as an extinct species of elephant in 1796. And Thomas Jefferson, interestingly, helped make the word mammoth mean something large. There was a description of a large wheel of cheese, the Cheshire Mammoth cheese, that was given to him in 1802. It weighed 1,230 pounds.
That's a lifetime supply of cheese right there in a single wheel.
I wonder if it was fully eaten.
Yeah. Did he eat it?
Well,
That's
I don't
the
think
follow-up question.
I don't think one person could eat all that cheese.
I assume that it was like a collectible. It sounds like. If it has a name, like, are you going to eat the mammoth cheese?
Well, why not if it's given to you as a gift? I don't know the details of the cheese, only that it was called the mammoth cheese. And he wasn't the only one using the term mammoth to mean something big. There's a baker in Philadelphia that had mammoth bread. A man in Washington said he was a mammoth eater. And someone in New York grew a 20-pound mammoth radish. So there was something in the air there about mammoth and big. Jefferson did send Lewis and Clark on their mission, partly to find a living mammoth.
Oh, I didn't realize he was hoping to find a living one. That's interesting.
I think that was like cherry on top kind of thing.
Yeah, I just looked up that Cheshire Mammoth cheese because I needed to know more about it.
You needed to? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's actually named after the town Cheshire in Massachusetts, which apparently the whole town gathered up all their cows and got all the milk from all the cows in order to make a huge thing of cheese for Jefferson. And they made a cheese press, which there is a monument for this cheese press that they made because obviously it's a very large press.
A mammoth press, one might say.
Yeah. Apparently, it actually wasn't every cow. They didn't allow any Federalist cows because of political reasons. I think they joked that it would make the cheese taste bad if they used cows from the wrong political party.
Wow.
And it was 4 feet wide and 15 inches thick. That's quite dense. I wouldn't have thought that would weigh half a ton, a 4-foot wide wheel. They had to transport it on a sleigh.
Just like some fossils.
Yeah, it was too heavy for wheels.
Are you done with the cheese? Can we get back to the mammoths?
I guess so. I can't figure out if he ate it or not. I really want to know if anyone knows if somebody ate the Cheshire Mammoth cheese. Please let us know. Sorry. I love cheese.
All right. On to the woolly mammoth. So the woolly mammoth, again, the name is Mammuthus primigenius, and it's one of the last mammoth species. At first, it was thought to be an elephant. Both Blumenbach and George Cuvier found the bones of what was called at the time Elephas primigenius, they knew that it was from an extinct species that led to the new name Mammuthus primigenius.
Because they didn't want it to have the same genus name as a living species?
Presumably. Researchers studied ancient DNA and found, though, that the woolly mammoth was closely related to Asian elephants, also known as Elephas maximus. So it's not too far off there.
Mm-hmm.
Other DNA studies found that woolly mammoths reproduced with other mammoth species sometimes, too. Woolly mammoths lived across northern Eurasia and North America, and like you were saying earlier, Garrett, yes, they coexisted with early humans. Woolly mammoths were probably social. There are cave paintings that show them in groups, and fossils have been found in groups. Their habitat is known as mammoth steppe or tundra steppe, and it had a lot of grass. The woolly mammoth lived in rich, grassy vegetation that was largely devoid of trees. It had clear skies, long hours of sunlight, moderate amounts of rain. Frozen woolly mammoths have been found in Siberia and North America, also skeletons, teeth, gut contents, poop, and, of course, woolly mammoths have been depicted in prehistoric cave paintings. Even though they were closely related to the Asian elephant, they were closer in size to the modern African elephant, with males weighing about 4 to 9 tons and being 8.8 to 11.5 feet, which is about 2.6 to 3.5 meters tall at the shoulder, and females weighing about 3 to 4.4 tons and being 7.5 to 8.5 feet, or 2.3 to 2.6 meters tall at the shoulder. And a newborn calf would have weighed about 200 pounds or 90 kilograms. I guess that makes sense since it took 22 months to gestate.
Yeah.
Mammoths grew well into their adult lives. Male woolly mammoths kept growing until age 40 and females until age 25.
Till age 40?
Yes, and mammoths may have lived up to age 60. That's based on comparisons with modern elephants.
That is a long growth curve.
Yes. And woolly mammoths were suited to live in cold, dry, open environments. They had small ears and short tails to help them minimize losing body heat. Their ears were similar in shape to human ears.
Oh, weird.
But much bigger. They're about 15 inches or 38 centimeters long.
That is big, but it doesn't sound big for an elephant relative.
Yes, that's true. As for the tail, there were only 21 vertebrae in the tail compared to 28 to 33 in modern elephants. Woolly mammoths had thick fat layers that were 3 to 4 inches or 8 to 10 centimeters deep beneath the skin, which also helped them stay warm. They had the long curved tusks and 4 molars. They replaced their molars 6 times in their life.
What? I thought all us mammals were stuck with 2 sets of teeth. I didn't realize mammoths got extra sets. I'm jealous.
I thought you would be. Each set was larger and had more ridges, so the first set was actually about the same size as our molars.
What?
And the 6th set could be about 1 foot or 0.3 meters long and weigh 4 pounds or 1.8 kilograms.
For one tooth?
One very large molar. I mean, we've seen it at the Western Science Center, actually.
Yeah.
Well, those were mastodon. But you get the idea. And they got their 6th set of molars at around age 30.
I think we saw some mammoth teeth there, too. I remember the whole bunch of parallel lines for the mammoth, whereas the mastodon was a little bit more like our teeth. It's got like the cusp bumps on it.
I guess about half their life they had to live with just one set of molars. They got their last set at age 30 and they lived to about age 60.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Woolly mammoths had a large head with a dome and a short neck with fat storage, a high hump on the shoulder, and a sloping back. It walked on its toes and had large fleshy pads on its feet. Its body was covered in fur ranging in length from a few inches to over 3 feet or 90 centimeters long.
For like a single hair?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is very long.
There were also glands in the skin that secreted oils into the hair, and that would have helped with insulation, repelling water, and just give its coat a nice glossy sheen.
The more of these adaptations to the cold I hear, I just keep thinking, uh-oh. Because you're talking about how there was like some pretty intense climate change warming the earth.
You changing your mind? Maybe it wasn't all humans' fault?
Yeah, a little bit.
Woolly mammoths had coarse, wiry hairs that were 3 to 6 times thicker than human hair, and then shorter, thinner hairs forming an underwool that was densely packed.
That's another uh-oh.
Yes. and there were long hairs on the tail. So it had this furry coat all over, and it varied in color from blonde to brown or almost black. The preserved hair is orange, but that's probably just a result of loss of natural pigment during its long burial. It probably did shed its fur in the spring, so that would have helped a little. Back to the tusks. The tusks were more curved than modern elephants, but there's a lot of individual variation with the tusks. It grew its tusks throughout its life, but then it slowed down as it became an adult, which is probably how we can tell how old it was through the tusks. Female tusks were smaller and thinner than male tusks, but the largest known tusk is 14 feet or 4.2 meters long and weighs 201 pounds or 91 kilograms.
That's almost as long as like the largest mammoth overall.
Yeah. More typical, though, is that they weighed 100 pounds or 45 kilograms, and they were about 8 to 9 feet or 2.4 to 2.7 meters long. Still large.
Yeah.
They would have used their tusks and trunks to move things around, fight, and forage for food, like modern elephants, and also to clear snow to get to the grass.
That's the one that I had heard of the most.
Mm-hmm. The tip of the trunk had these two long finger-like projections, so it could wrap its trunk around large tufts of grass or break off leafy branches.
I feel like elephants can do that too, because we know they can hold a paintbrush.
Yeah, but I think it's even more pronounced with the mammoths, at least the woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoths mostly ate grass and grass-like vegetation. They may have foraged up to 20 hours a day. A 6-ton adult would need to eat nearly 400 pounds or 180 kilograms of food a day. They probably timed their breeding so their babies would be born in plant growth season, so they could all eat. Some, again, pathologies have been found, including osteomyelitis, a bone infection, and arthritis. Some had gum disease, and some had teeth with cancerous growths. Scientists figured out that one woolly mammoth, known as Kick, walked about 43,500 miles or 70,000 kilometers in its life, which is almost enough to walk around the world twice.
That's pretty random.
Yeah, it's a male that died almost 17,100 years ago in Alaska. It was 28 years old when it died. They analyzed the DNA and studied his tusks, and the isotopes in the tusks gave an idea of where the mammoth lived and where in Alaska it roamed around. They figured out he roamed the lower Yukon River basin when he was young and was probably part of a herd. And then around age 16, there was a shift. Like possibly he got kicked out of the herd. Maybe it was a matriarchal society. And then based on that, like male elephants get kicked out around that age. The last 18 months of Kick's life, he lived in a small area. It's possible he was sick or hurt. It seems that he starved to death.
Just some quick math. That means Kick was walking about 4 to 5 miles a day, which would be about 10,000 steps a day, which is that random arbitrary number a lot of people try to do.
Wow. That really adds up, those steps.
Yeah.
Again, there's been a lot of depictions of woolly mammoths in paintings, engravings, sculptures, and more than 70 dwellings are known that are made of woolly mammoth bones.
70?
Yeah.
That is a lot of dwellings.
It could have been from scavenging or hunting. They use the large bones as foundations and the tusks for entrances.
Oh, I've seen that in like cartoons and video games and stuff, but I always thought it was like a video game designer or a cartoonist being like, you know, if you take 2 mammoth tusks, they kind of make an arch like a doorway.
They weren't the first ones to come up with that idea.
It was a real thing that they did. That's crazy.
So there is evidence of humans butchering woolly mammoths based on cut marks and breaks and stone tools found nearby, but again, could have been scavenging or hunting. Because woolly mammoth populations died out over time. They didn't go extinct all at once. They mostly died out between 14,000 and 10,000 years ago, but the last known population died out about 4,000 years ago. So going back to that, humans may have been a factor in their extinction, but that 2021 study found that climate change and changes in vegetation were the main causes.
Okay. I'm convinced.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Well, I got to follow what the experts find because I have not studied this.
No.
It does seem like the humans definitely didn't help, but maybe they didn't hurt as much as I would assume given how we've treated other animals.
Mm.
Maybe they were a little bit too big for us to completely drive to extinction like we did with some of the slightly smaller animals.
There might be more future studies that find something different. I don't know, but for now, that's the thinking.
I was mostly thinking of the study that I saw that was basically saying Homo erectus and some of our human ancestors were basically hypercarnivores until they ran out of stuff to hunt. And then they, like, by necessity, switched to eating more fruit and grains and things like that. So I assumed woolly mammoths were a part of that equation, the large meat sources that humans were going through for a while.
Doesn't sound like they were.
No, and it doesn't really line up time-wise now that I'm thinking about it, because like Homo erectus was way, way, way before woolly mammoths went extinct.
Well, we'll leave it to the experts.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who listen to our Dinosaur of the Day segment and you like it, please consider becoming a patron. We take new Dinosaur of the Day requests from our patrons and offer a bunch of other perks as well. So check out our page at patreon.com/iknowdino or click the link on the left.